Did anyone else get stuck into the Negronis on Wednesday? Because I had one when I was supposed to be leaving, and they were so good. I did rate his cocktail skills. Rob, did you have one?
I don't drink alcohol, but I believe you.
Apparently, there are some really good non-alcoholic Negronis out there now, some really good mixes, but I haven't tried them yet. So if you ever were a Negroni fan, that is available.
Wicked. I'll give it a go.
And actually, I need to ask Jarlin, they had a bottle of like some non-alcoholic tonic or something, and it was so delicious. Began with a B. If anyone can remember it, please put it in chat. Let me just admit. Okay, so we're up to 20 now. So while we're waiting, please, everyone, just do a quick intro in chat. Say hello. And also, it would be really interesting to know, what AI tools are you currently using in your marketing, if any? I was playing around with Midjourney yesterday. I think I need a lesson in prompts because the images I were creating was not what I was trying to do. But I think that was definitely my fault, not the tools. My prompts were pretty basic. So yeah, I think that might be another lesson we need.
Yeah, the best example I've ever had of, or I've ever witnessed of using image generators was for a response we were doing for a client. And it was one of those like crazy things like, hey, you know, the ad could run with like, you know, a Colombian drug cartel wearing like flashy trainers. And it was like, well, we're not going to get an image for that. And I went, hang on. So I went to DALL-E, and it was pretty good, but it's almost like you need hyper specific prompts.
Yeah,
for it to go. I know what you want. I know what you want.
So we've got lots of people here using ChatGPT. You've just mentioned DALL-E, which I didn't know about. If you're using Midjourney, Claude, Perplexity, Notebook LM.
I actually have a chart in a bit, because when people signed up to Luma, they were also asked to answer that question. So I charted it up, and yes, I used Claude for it. So you get to see what everyone else.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, wonderful. Okay, let's just add.
I've heard Claude is actually better than ChatGPT. You know, it just sounds more real, a little bit shallow.
Thank you very much. That's exactly the correct take.
Okay, good.
Has Simon seen the presentation? Is my question.
No, I have not. No.
Because Claude is definitely a favourite.
I do appreciate the 25 quid though. Thank you for that.
So we've got 39 people in now. So should we get started, Rob? Make the most of our 1 hour?
Let's do it. How do you want to start? Shall I just start, or do you want to do a little preamble?
So first of all, thank you very much to Rob, who is going to be telling us how we can use AI to reduce our marketing madness. I don't think there is anyone in this group that isn't suffering from chaotic marketing activities being pulled in multiple directions. So anything we can do to reduce it using AI would be wonderful. And I think it also might help us deal with some of those founder CEO questions. We'll just get AI to do it. They seem to think it's like a miracle cure for all. So I'm going to pass over to Rob, who's going to be talking us through his recommendations on how to handle our crazy worlds and fix all our lives, Rob. No pressure.
Oh yeah, no pressure on a Friday. Right. So yeah, the title of this is how AI can help us manage marketing madness. And one thing you should know about me is I absolutely love an alliteration. So if you think that was manufactured, trust your instincts. But I should say that, you know, to preamble all this, there is absolutely zero prompt best practices in this document, and I'll go on to explain why in a minute. I think the whole prompting thing is overrated, maybe apart from image generation, but for the written stuff, I think it's a bit overrated. Anyway, let's go. So when I put forward this talk idea to Nicola and James in CMO Circle, folks, yeah, I feel like the reasons this appeals to people, and you know, I'm told that there's actually quite a significant number of people wanting to attend this compared to the average, is that I basically managed to find two of the most zeitgeisty things that we're all worrying about, which is AI and feeling overwhelmed. And they are separate, but they also help each other. So that is really what I'm going to spend the next 50 minutes talking about. Like I said, a bunch of you had to fill out the Luma form, and I just thought it was interesting to go and see what the majority of people were using. But heaven forbid if I count manually like it's the Stone Age. So I exported it, I put it into Claude, and it gave me a chart. And it literally just charted it up. I was not expecting that. I was expecting a list, which then I needed to put into a Google Slides, a Google Sheets or whatever. But yeah, vast majority use ChatGPT, which is good, followed by Perplexity. I'm a massive fan. Followed by Claude, also massive fan. Followed by Midjourney, which I've dabbled with, but I'm more of a words person, not an images person, but I do recognize its value. And then a bunch of other things, including Copilot, which, yeah, I've not used it a lot because I have PTSD with Microsoft software, so I'm sorry. And then also we asked in terms of frequency, right? So in terms of frequency, a couple of times a week, once a day, multiple times a day are the top 3. It's actually interesting that what this tells me is that we have a crowd of people that either already use it quite a lot, but a bit like me, or a bit nerdy, a bit curious about how else might I be using it, what other tools might I want to incorporate into my workflows. And then a few other people, which we can call the casually curious, which essentially use it a couple of times a week. Maybe every now and then you see other people talking about it. You go, oh yeah, I've not used it in a while. You may or may not have the premium subscriptions. I suspect if you use it multiple times, you do. If you use it a couple times a week, you don't, because, it's just, it's not super expensive, but it is money. And then a few other people that use it less regularly. But what's encouraging is that in a way, the reason I'm not doing a prompting on one thing is because I don't think any of you need it. I think you can probably cut the bullshit in terms of like, oh, this is going to 10x your results, whatever. I think that's kind of amateur hour discourse. And, that probably rules out 90% of my LinkedIn feed as a result. So what I want to what I want you to take away from this really is to be more comfortable using AI as part of your process, which I suspect some of you already do, but maybe you're always curious for more, and kind of make the madness a bit more manageable. Now, I can't cure it, right? I'm sorry if Nicola overpromised it to you, but I can't cure the madness. I can just make it a bit more manageable, but really that's all any of us can ever do in life. So let's keep going. So, right. I'm Rob. I didn't put my last name here because you're going to try and guess how you say it, but I'll tell you how you say it. You split it in 3. It's Streitingu. If you see it written, it doesn't sound like that, but that's how you say it. I've been doing all sorts of things around brand comms and content strategy for about 15 years, mostly agency side, with a little very temporary in-house thing. And earlier this year, I started a company called Salmon Labs, which is a little consultancy that I run, which is basically me. I kind of play a lot in between these two spaces, or what I call the fundamentals of brand communications, and then the frenzy of digital culture, which is, yes, John, I'm sorry. I thought your last name was Lyons, by the way. Yeah, so I play in that space, and that's because my background is social and digital, but over the years I started doing more kind of integrated stuff. Although I learned at the meetup on Wednesday that only agencies talk about integrated roles, and a lot of CMOs are like, what the fuck are you talking about? Isn't it just marketing? So that was fun. And I also write this newsletter, some might say furiously so, because I absolutely love writing, which is called Salmon Theory. And in case you're wondering, yes, I really fucking like salmon, the fish, because it swims upstream, and that is really, really rad. I should also say I'm not an expert in AI, right? And I think actually, unless you're building or investing, but mostly building, I don't think anyone's really an expert on AI. We're all witnessing this thing unfolding in front of us and trying to keep up, but there are very few experts, unless they're academics, builders, etc. I know some people will proclaim to be experts. I'm not one of them, but I'm an expert in being overwhelmed in various forms and guises. And maybe I'm an expert in being less crap at dealing about that overwhelm. So that's what I'm going to spend some time focusing on. And oh my God, that's such a soothing gif of Leo DiCaprio. And I define overwhelm as basically being the feeling of, we all love being inside of our heads to think about problems, but if we're too much in our heads, that becomes a problem. And we actually didn't ask in the Luma survey, but we could have, if I were to ask, oh, do you consider yourself to be an overthinker? Chances are 90+% would have said yes. And that is kind of when it starts getting tricky. And so what causes overwhelm? I mean, it really varies, right? When I first wrote this talk, it was targeting more a kind of freelancer, independent consultant kind of crowd. But when I start thinking about it from the context of CMOs, marketing directors, or people working in startups, there's many things, you know, needing to achieve more with less, which isn't exclusive to startup land, constantly changing goalposts, which I hear is quite specific to startup land, investor pressure, many others as well. So if you have any particular reasons for overwhelm, this is a perfect opportunity to drop it there. So yeah, please do share your own, and then we can use those as examples or prompts, no pun intended, later on when we do a little Q&A. Before I get into the practical things, I just want to share with you 3 foundational beliefs I have about AI. The first one is, people still ask if it's cheating, and I say yes, but so is Excel. Make of that what you will. The second thing is, I believe, so one of my favorite poems is about work-life balance, and it broadly concludes that you can have everything in life, just not at the same time. And I think AI is the same. I think AI can theoretically do all of your job, just not at the same time. And that is a whole other thing which we can unpack a separate time. But if you have questions about that, please ask me, because I love talking about this stuff. And then the last thing is, like I said at the beginning, I think prompting is overrated and probing is underrated. And that means basically, if we keep saying, I got to craft the perfect prompt and then see a spectacular result, that's basically like obsessing with the template that you're going to use instead of questioning what are the things that go into the template themselves. Whereas probing is much more conversational, much more collaborative. It's much more human even as a way of dealing with AI. And in some sense, I think we spend far more time worrying about the prompts and the templates and the perfect sentence structures and less about asking questions, having taste, which we'll get onto in a second. But, you know, broadly speaking, probing requires taste, and AI doesn't have taste. You have taste. You get to probe, ask interesting questions, pick up interesting things that it said, and just probing on that. So those are my 3 little caveats. Now, let's talk about use cases, really, because that's what you're here for. So I, even before starting Salmon Labs, I worked at a place called VCCP, which I think was one of the first agencies to introduce an AI-specific agency. I had nothing to do with that, but I know people who did. And basically, I just made sure I sat next to them because they were really fucking brilliant. But as a result, I really got into playing, messing around, a bit like, I like to think I'm a bit like Tony Stark, but maybe with, you know, shittier facial hair and general hair, really, and personality. Anyway, let's move on. So 5 use cases based on the last kind of 12 months, give or take, of messing around. The first one is audience personas. And I'm probably going to trigger half of you now, because half of you might go, ooh, personas, they're kind of fake, aren't they? And others might go, yes, they're kind of fake, but they're also important. I'll give you an example of something that I worked on about a year ago, where essentially I was working on one of VCP's clients, Shell Energy, and I basically was asked to write a communications plan targeting sustainability directors. And that was specifically to help them with all sorts of things, but broadly speaking, to reimagine their value chains in order to reduce emissions. And Shell Energy had a load of products and services to help them do that. But the problem is, I'm not a sustainability director. I don't know any sustainability directors. There was no time to think about it. There was no budget. And there was really no appetite to do primary research. And by the way, very little research as well. So you're left with 2 options, right? You either go, great, let's just say who we are and call it brand awareness, and you know, just kind of do that and not really think about the audience. But because I am a strategist that kind of cares a little bit about what he actually does and how he adds value, I thought, I'm going to try and see if I can find some intel on the audience in a different way. And so I'd say this was probably my first experiment, whereas I started thinking about, because at the time, a lot of people were talking about how you want to prime the tool before asking it things. And so I was like, okay, let me just write like a little descriptor of like, you are a sustainability director, you care about this, that, or the other, et cetera, et cetera. And I specifically gave it a bit of a profile, type of company you work for, the verticals you might be involved in, et cetera. But broadly speaking, what I really wanted to get out of it was give me a description of drivers to purchase, barriers to purchase, any misunderstood concerns. What should I think about in terms of the sales life cycle that you need to, where you need to intervene in order to actually get the business to buy into a new carbon credits program or whatever. And amongst other things, one of the things that I thought was quite interesting, and I would never really thought about it, or at least not on time, because eventually if I'd read enough about it, I might have caught it. But one of the big things it said is that if you think about sustainability directors in Southeast Asia, they're far more likely to worry about maximizing existing infrastructure, because they're not that worried about regulation because there is less than in Europe, but they're basically going, did I just build all this industrial stuff and now it's all going to waste? And therefore the messaging should be more about, no, we can help you basically make use of your existing infrastructure. Whereas in Europe, it was much more of a question of, we'll make sure you're right, you have regulatory compliance and you're basically not going to get fined. And stuff like that, like I said, we could have gotten there, but because we were so tight on time, it was just so helpful to kind of gain that perspective and then use that to brief the work, the tactical work in slightly different ways. Because it was all going to be the same campaign, just slightly different tactical iterations. So just on this, question for the group is if you have specific examples where you've wrestled with something similar, you need to understand an audience that's hard to understand, like, I don't know, high net worth individuals or a particular subgroup of youth, or particular, particular countries that you never really did much research on, and you can't afford to do much research on. If there are examples like that, just put it in the comments, because I think it's helpful for all of us to feel maybe a bit seen, that maybe other marketers are worrying about what are the audiences that I don't have access to, and could ChatGPT or Claude, I favor Claude, could it help you get a better understanding of it? Cool. Research summaries. This is where Claude excels. Many of them excel, but Claude particularly is amazing. So I saw a piece a while ago on Fast Company, which is one of the many new pieces that basically talk about, look, everything's kind of wrong, because it basically goes, and I'm sure they didn't mean it that way, but it felt that way. They go, a generative AI promised limitless creation, and instead it's all about summarization. As if that's a bad thing, because they were basically going, oh, it could have been great, it's just giving us shorter emails. I don't know about you, but I welcome shorter emails. I welcome shorter everything at this point, because we all have more information than energy in our lives. I mean, I don't know about you, my inbox is wild and I can't tame it, but also I don't want to let go of it because I want to read all the newsletters I subscribe to. I have more PDFs in my drive than I'll ever have time to read, although I'm getting close. The FOMO, plus the fact we are basically living in a massive filter failure era, means that we all end up going, I really want to learn more and know more and read more, but fuck, I don't have time for anything. And let's be honest, 90% of the reports we're given basically regurgitate other reports. So it's very hard to know where the signal is and where the noise is. And so for that, tools like Claude are phenomenal. It's actually the best summary buddy out there, in my opinion. I've used ChatGPT for it. It's okay. But there's just something about Claude that I prefer. Maybe it's the way it produces the results. Maybe it's just the interface. Maybe I'm that superficial, but the typography and the fonts are just much more pleasant. I'm sorry, but that is also a factor for me. More on the technical side, it has a massive context window. It basically doesn't crash with a 27 megabyte PDF, which usually is quite big, especially when there's like loads of graphics and stuff. And essentially the way I use it is to ask it for things like, hey, here's this document. Can you give me the exact summary or the top 10 stats or whatever? And I've used it for tons of things, but specifically, like if I'm, for example, working on a state of B2B brand marketing effectiveness, I had all the PDFs I needed to read and not a lot of time to kind of digest them. So I just loaded one by one on Claude, and I went, pull out the most interesting statistics here. And then by having the stats, I was able to build a story around them. But you see how, like, I could have asked Claude to write the presentation for me. It probably would have been an okay presentation, but not great. But I knew I could write a good presentation. I just needed the evidence extracted for me. So that's a good example of how it gave me things. I sent it some follow-up questions about the stats and what it meant. And then as a result, I just ended up with a much better presentation. But actually recently I did something else entirely, which was, you don't need to read this, I'll explain what it is. But so as part of Salmon Theory, I run a little private community as well. And one of the things that I asked a while ago is, hey, can you please tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly of synthetic research? Because it's kind of quite new in the news. And I just asked, like, what's good, what's bad, what's horrible? Just tell me everything that's on your mind. And a bunch of people replied. And what I did as a result, I was like, okay, this is great, but I need to organize it. So I literally just exported, or I copied the different responses, and I just put it onto Claude, and I went, please tell me the names of the people who participated in this, and tell me, and organize it by the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then I took that as a structure to write a little thing on the newsletter about. And it was just so much easier to go, okay, here's what we know about synthetic research based on the opinions of these 8 individuals. And it just saved me a lot of time and a lot of overwhelm around writing. Because if you're afraid of starting to structure things when you're writing, this is a gold mine of just gives you the structure that you need. And then you can put your own taste, your own sensitivities, your own tone on top of it. So I think most of you will say yay, but some people might go, summarization, it's kind of bad because, and by the way, I get it, because there's an equally compelling argument to go, sometimes going through the hardship of reading something in order to apprehend what it means has value. And I'm not questioning that, especially if you're more junior. It's really important to know how to go sit through different presentations and unpack what they mean. And you know, that's how we learn. We learn by spending time with things. But that being said, I bloody love a summary, and I wish there was more summaries in my life. I love an exec summary. All my presentations start with an exec summary because A, it's clear for me what I'm going to talk about, and B, it's thinking about the audience that's going to be on the receiving end. Cool. Now, on a wider sense, let's talk about market dynamics. And by market, I mean competitors, macro trends, culture, audiences, whatever. So this is what marketing feels like, right? And it definitely feels this way in agencies. It definitely feels this way in some clients I've worked with. And I suspect if you work in startups, it's this, but like 10 times faster. But the way I see it, the great thrill of working in marketing is also its greatest terror, which is you get to do all sorts of things. You get to learn all sorts of things every single day. And you have fuck all time to actually do it properly, or to feel like you're doing it properly because you're on a deadline or because someone asked and it's not negotiable. So we are always playing catch up with, you know, if, for example, from an agency side, it's like, right, you're not going to work on investment banking. Have you ever done it before? Kind of. Okay, we need to know how it looks in Germany. Oh, client meetings tomorrow. Oh, you know, so stuff like that. So for that, perplexity, I think, is great. As some of you mentioned it, I think perplexity is what Google should have become. It has a great interface. It sources all of its findings. It structures them. I genuinely, if I've Googled stuff in the past 3 months, it was by accident because I have the Perplexity app on my phone. I have it on my browser. I mostly use it to research everything now. And specifically for this, I use it for, and now it's like a list. You don't have to do top 10. You can not give it a number, but I like going, just give me the top 10 things I need to know about X. So for example, it might be top 10 market dynamics of this category in this country, and it will source it for you. It's phenomenal. It also gives you like suggested questions, which I think is great because it basically goes, right, here's what we got. Here's things you might want to know if you want to go deeper into the rabbit hole. So I recently started looking into masculinity for various reasons, including the fact that it is now Movember, and I kind of, you know, I've been supporting Movember and men's health for about 5 years now. But I was interested in reading more about masculinity, and I know that Scott Galloway has thoughts on it. So I went, hey, Perplexity, give me a summary of what Scott Galloway thinks about modern masculinity. And it just goes, brrr, and it pulled from newsletters, podcasts, Reddit threads, all of it. And it was great. It started giving me the top line of what he was into. I also wanted a more diverse perspective. So I went, what are the other authors that are talking about masculinity? What's their general thesis? What do they say? And so it gave me like Michael Kimmer, Bell Hooks, Jack Donovan, Mark Manson, etc. And I kept going with a few more. I'm not going to bore you with all the things I searched, but I looked into like academic studies, etc., etc. And that is just like a great way of getting the top line of where should I start? It's not a here's the answer. It's where should I start? And it also then gives me like specific questions, right? Because for instance, I very quickly realized that, well, it's hard to talk about masculinity if you're starting to approach it from a non-binary perspective. So how the hell do you do that? And the question is, the answer is I don't know, but it's a really good question, or at least a very important caveat when I'm doing my research to go, by the way, I'm only looking at this from a binary perspective, but there is a massive caveat for anyone who identifies as non-binary. And, you know, there's just tons of other things like, you know, how does it differ in the West versus East? You know, it just gives you more things to keep going. It gives you that sense of momentum. The other thing I just want to call out, and it's a bit of a plug, and I feel a bit dirty doing it, but I've actually been working with this company, which I really love, called Idea Ape. And they do what Perplexity does, but exclusively for Reddit. And I think it's really smart because basically they use Reddit data and they process through a GPT in order to give you audience profiles related to that topic. So for example, I did a little test for this session, which was CMO and investment, because I wanted to understand what should I know about CMOs who are in either a high investment startup or who are looking to raise investment for their marketing spend for 2025, etc. And it just spits out different profiles, which again, if you just want to have a top line view of what should I know about people that identify with this segment based on what real people are saying, it's great. Like, honestly, I've done tons of social listening projects before, and then this like 3-person team just beat a bunch of enterprise software to the punch by just having a leaner way of doing it. So I'm a big fan. I know the founder. We're doing some work together, and I basically told him, can you give me a code so I can like give it to people, because I really want them to try it. So if you put the code ROB there, you actually then get 10% off. Also, I'm doing some research for these guys. So if you want to be part of some qual that I'm doing, please let me know, because, you know, we already have tons of people interested, but the more the merrier, the more perspectives I get, the better, because I want them to really succeed. Anyway, plug over. My point being, I want us all to get closer to good old Keanu Reeves here, who's dodging his own blind spots in line with what I'm saying. And that is it. It's like you go into a meeting, at the very least, you have a base level of knowledge of what to ask, what are the open questions, and basically you look less like a fool. And which I know sounds basic, but you know, none of us like to look like fools. Now, creative problem solving, a bit closer to home to my agency kind of work, but useful for all of us. You don't need to be a creative to have creative problem solving as part of your job. All you need is not enough time or money, and you need to get creative. So I should say that the jury, I think, is still out on whether it's better to have, or at least I think it is. You know, it might have changed since I last checked, but I know that there's still a debate of like, is it better to have a large body of knowledge or a targeted body of knowledge? The question is, the answer is a lot of people are still trying to find out. But for me, a useful middle ground is to feed it kind of model-based knowledge, where essentially I'll go, hey, here's like the top line of what the Deck of Brilliance, if you don't know it, is a phenomenal website on 52 creative approaches to solve anything. And it's very targeted at people, but I would say it applies to most things that involve creativity and communications and marketing to some extent. But yeah, I just go, here's what the Deck of Brilliance says. I load it as a PDF to a custom GPT. And now I have basically a Deck of Brilliance shaped specific GPT to whom I can ask tons of things. To whom? That's weird. It's not a person, but you know what I mean. But basically, stuff like that, or if you follow a 4Cs framework and you explain how to think about the culture part, the category part, the consumer part, the company part, etc. You may load it into with the business model canvas and go, hey, I have this idea for X, Y, and Z. Put it through the business model canvas and give me options. Like, the point being, you can feed it models and then just kind of help you think better. And a really good example of this, and you're going to have to bear with me, there's a reason why this GIF is here. Earlier this year, I was working on a project with a creative director. We're kind of freelancing for a company, and they're on a very, very tight deadline. And so they basically had like 2 weeks to both brief and deliver a brand campaign. Not like the full assets, but like an idea and initial expressions across various channels. And we're kind of going, yeah, we could start thinking about it. But as I was toying with this deck of brilliance thing, I kind of turned it into a custom GPT. And I basically said, hey, why don't we feed it our brief? We see what it says. And then collectively, we start making decisions about what are the most interesting ways in. And then you go away and think about it. And so we did exactly that. We basically sat in a Costa Coffee in Victoria, looking at ChatGPT, giving out like, hey, for this brief, you might want to dramatize the problem, dramatize the solution, dramatize the new problem that emerges if you solve their existing problem. All sorts of things that we know work very well in advertising, but it just shortcutted it to go, maybe start with these 4, these 3, and then go from there. And it really gave us a good starting point to start thinking about the problem in a much, much faster way. And it was actually a great example of what I usually call kind of the first gear of your mind, which is AI-powered research isn't going to solve it for you. It just gets momentum going. That's what a first gear in an engine does. It just goes, right, now we're starting, right? And a lot of times with creative projects, it's the starting that really hurts because you go, oh my God, where to begin? So using tools like this to go, help me begin, is very, very underrated. And I should stress that it's not the end point. It is just the beginning to kind of give you a little push. So by the way, how cool is this GIF? That's martial art wizardry going on there. So bit of a heretical question, because some people are triggered by frameworks, but if you have your favorite model or framework you'd like to give it a go with, please put it in the chat, because I'd like to keep experimenting with different models and almost like have an army of specialists in the golden circles and the 5 forces and the blue ocean strategy, just having like different GPTs that only do those things, and then running problems through it and see how they think about it. So yeah, if you have favorite model or framework, just drop it in, because I'm not a big framework guy, but I love collecting them in order to just give me like more tools to think about things. But then I'm extremely polyamorous about the framework I use, as I think we actually should all be. So moving on. Last but not least, strategic storytelling. I love one of the things my time at VCP that I tried to get, but he very politely said no. And by the way, he was absolutely right, because it is IP. But my former CSO had a phenomenal presentation where he went through the structure of stories in order to basically show that there's only so many story shapes to a pitch document. And I thought that was really smart. Anyway, strategic storytelling, big deal if you're pitching. And by pitching, I don't just mean being an agency pitching to a client. I mean being a marketer pitching to their boss, or pitching to the board, or pitching to an investor. It's all, I know it's kind of a loaded word, storytelling, but it's all kind of story driven. So how to use AI for strategic storytelling. So the specific use case for this is not so much the story itself, it's getting you unstuck when you're trying to sort out what the hell you're thinking and saying, right? And the reality is every project eventually gets you lost in the woods, like little John Travolta here. And what I mean by that is you don't really know left from right anymore. You've read 78 pages of 78 different reports, and they start giving you conflicting things, and you don't know what the hell to think anymore. You even forget what the brief was in the first place. You feel lost, right? This is very common when you're starting out and it's just so much, or eventually you're so into it that you hit a roadblock, you start losing perspective. And for those of us that believe that marketing is fundamentally about being orientated to what the market needs, lack of perspective is kind of the death of that. And so how the hell do you go back to having perspective? Well, I have a slightly unconventional use case for Otter AI. Most of you might know it as the little tool that shows up in calls and records them for you and transcribes them and sends you notes after. By the way, it is phenomenal for that. I use it for that as well. But a few months ago, I was working on a brief with one of my clients, and it was one of those cases where it was so much information, I didn't know where to start, but I also needed to go on a walk because I was tired of just looking at screens all day. And so I had this idea, hey, I'm going to download Otter AI. I love a walking meeting. I do some of my best thinking while I'm walking or talking to someone, ideally both. And so what if I because I was working from home, because I don't have someone in the team to go, come walk with me and let's talk about something. I just thought, could I do that with Otter AI? And the answer is yes, you can. And the way it works is very simple. You get the mobile app, you go on a walk, you press record, and you basically pretend to be like those academics in Hollywood films that don't make notes. They just do note to self, blah, blah, blah. But essentially what I do is I just start talking about it, like where I think the project's at and what I think the story is. And I'm not reading notes, I'm just going from memory, because essentially if you remember it and you can explain it without having a visual aid, chances are that is the most memorable part of what you're looking at. And I think sometimes we over-rely on having everything written down in order to know the story, when in fact, the best projects that I felt part of is when I can talk about the strategy or the ambition without needing any slides. It just becomes so much a part of how I think about that brand or that problem that the narrative is well rehearsed in my head. But not in a like super mechanical way, just because it is so simple that you can explain it in casual conversation. So Otter AI can be great for that, because you're going on a walk. Walking is great to release the mind, kind of soften up a little bit. You're talking as you're walking, you're reflecting. You don't have to get it right, by the way. Just keep talking. Oh, I didn't mean that. I meant this instead, et cetera, et cetera. Or maybe that bit was wrong. You know, just riff as you're going. And then the reason I use Otter for that is because then it automatically transcribes that. It loads it onto my account, which I can check when I'm back on my desk on my laptop. And then I just export it, put it on Claude and go, hey, summarize this for me in like 10 bullet points, critique it, build on it. Where's the logic flaw? What else do I need to investigate? And so stuff like that, I think, is very helpful just to kind of continually try and stress test what your story is on a particular project, which a lot of times we don't spend enough time doing. We just go, I'm just going to start doing slides. And you need a story before you do slides. So Otter can be great for that. And I like that feeling of like you're riffing and unpacking and whatever, and then eventually it just comes all together in your head. It's such a great feeling. It's one of those things that like a lot of people go, oh, the reason I'm in this industry is because of the creativity. I actually think the biggest emotional driver for me is the sense of clarity when you go, oh my God, I found this very clear way of thinking about a situation, whereas 3 days ago I was utterly confused about it. So I love that feeling. I think it's one of the best feelings. So yeah, walking meetings with AI. Is that weird? Is that okay? Would you try it? Just add it in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of pop-ups, so I imagine people are talking about stuff, but I thought I'd just keep adding prompts to keep you entertained. So, because I know we want to maybe spend some time for questions or pushbacks or whatever, I'm open to all of it. Just wanted to summarize these 5 use cases. There's probably more, but I'm also conscious that it's a Friday, it's lunchtime, and we only have an hour. So audience personas, great for that. Research summaries, market dynamics, creative problem solving, and strategic storytelling. The thing I also did, because I basically ran out of time to do more slides and I was worried I was going to go over time, which I was worried. I actually just did a list of like my 1-sentence hot take on a bunch of other tools, but this is more to kind of yeah, just to give you a slightly broader perspective on tools that you might have been wondering, oh, what about Gemini? I think Gemini is actually a bit disappointing because Google could and should have done better. And I know that they're improving it, but as a first entry to market, not great. Notebook LM, I love it. I love the Americanized podcast version of anything. I'm actually intrigued to take the ginormous 70-page repository of random research notes I have on masculinity, put it on Notebook LM, and see what that podcast looks like. Hopefully it doesn't look like a strange Manosphere Jordan Peterson ripoff, but so it's useful. I just don't know yet what for, but want to keep tinkering with. Copilot, this is a character flaw, if nothing else, but I've always felt a bit icky with Microsoft software, so I haven't really tried it. I know people swear by it. It definitely made Bing better and stuff, but frankly, for the use cases that I use it for, that I use AI for, I just use other specialized tools. I'm a massive fan of Work. Subscribe to it, and Work have a really good AI tool, which is fantastic for hyper-specific research needs. So if you do have a subscription to Work, definitely use it, because I think it's very good. More than being very good, it's just very helpful. It's very helpful. Like, oh, I need to know how other companies have done financial literacy, and it just goes, here's a bunch of reports that talk about that. Someone introduced me to Consensus, which is basically Perplexity, but for academia. So I'm still testing it, but it's basically like a hyper-segmented version of Perplexity. Perplexity also does academic studies, but I think Consensus only does academic studies. So I'm going to maybe do some side-by-side comparison and see what they do and how they do. I am, won't say I'm big on quant, but I like quant. But Global Web Index has also an AI thing where you can ask it, like, give me charts on, the over-indexing of anime consumption all over the world. It's useful-ish, but I actually like doing my own crosstabs. I think it makes me feel smart about myself because I can actually read tables. So for some reason, I haven't really tried it. I like doing let's add these rows and these columns and see where the data is, etc. That being said, I've also loaded massive crosstabs into Claude and asked it questions, and it's very good for that as well. So there's another company I'm increasingly interested in, more for the ad people in the room, but it's called Ad Daily. Their founder is a guy called Piotr, who's a very interesting thinker in the space. And it's just basically a massive library of examples. And you can go, hey, show me the best B2B brand building ads that have run in the last 5 years. And it goes, yeah, here you go. Here's a bunch of examples. So I'm still testing it, but I think it's cool. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention the AI-powered anything. Like, our fridge now has AI. Our toothbrush now has AI. No comment. It's all kind of bullshit. Sorry. So that's me. That's a lot of talking. Hopefully not too fast. But just as a final thing, I write about stuff like this on my newsletter. So if you're interested in reading more about how I think about these things, please do subscribe if you don't already. I'd love you to give a go to Idea Ape. I think they'd be very happy to either get you to trial, or if you want to participate in our research, just let me know. And I know that as an incentive, they're going to give you like credits to use. So probably either participate in the research and get credits, or if you put this code, you get a discount and you can just use it straight away. But either way, you can use it straight away. And that's what I got for today. So next contentious topic. Me loves, hate. I'm Rob's typing everywhere.
That was fabulous, Rob. A question that's come up from a couple of people is, what's the difference between ChatGPT, Claude, and some of the others? And also, what do you use free versions versus paid? And roughly how much are they costing?
Okay, so I originally got into Claude over ChatGPT because Claude is much more human in its responses, which I know sounds really weird to say for an AI tool, but it is. It's not only much more human, but I also think it's conceptually stronger. So I'll give you an example. Sorry, let me just sip a bit of coffee. I'll give you an example. If I give it a brief and I go, how should I think about what the big communications platform for this brand should be, given this brief, this target audience, these objectives, etc. If I ask it to Claude, it can think more in terms of, here's the high-level thing that you should be anchoring everything around. ChatGPT goes, you should find some influencers to work with. So it gets tactical very, very quickly. And that, a few months ago when I did that test side by side, I was like, nah, I don't think so. So I started using more Claude. ChatGPT is much more customizable, probably is the way I would say it, because they have their own plugin store. There's tons of people building for it, and you can use those plugins. It has DALL-E, which is their image generator tool, and you can build your own custom GPTs. So I would say if you want more bespoke things, and it has web search as well, which Claude doesn't really have, although they're doing more external linking now. So I'd say if you want more customizable things, probably ChatGPT is better. If you want more, just fix it for me, maybe Claude is better. A useful analogy, just thought of it, might be wrong, might be how 10 years ago people thought about iPhones versus Android. Maybe, I don't know, but that's how I see it. In terms of the prices, so I actually use, for the tools that I mentioned, I use the premium version of all of them. And that's partly because I run a limited company, it's just marketing expenditure. I save on corporation tax. So that's how I make rationale in my mind. But from memory, Claude is $18 a month. ChatGPT, I think it's like 20. Is it 20 now? I forget. Idea Ape is like 20 quid, although they're changing their pricing.
What's Perplexity, Rob?
Perplexity, I think that is about $20 as well.
Okay.
It's all in that margin of like
Yeah.
$20-ish, and then, you know, mostly it gives you access to most of the things. You can make some savings. Like Perplexity actually draws from ChatGPT and Claude, like their models. So if you want to start with one, actually the first one I invested in and kept the monthly subscription was Perplexity, because it's good at summarizing, it's good at reasoning, and it's good at search. So I just went, okay, this does a lot of it for me. So actually, if you want to start with one, I would maybe start with Perplexity. It's very complete. But then because I was nerdy about trying all of them, I just ended up buying all of them.
And Rob, are there any up and coming ones that you don't think are quite there yet, but ones to watch?
Oh, God. I'll answer slightly differently. There are plenty that I find interesting, but haven't really tested yet. I think the image to video stuff is wild. I've not really gone into it properly. There are platforms that are still in closed beta, but apparently a company called Springboards AI is meant to be quite good for conceptual thinking and strategic thinking. But also I've heard of things like you can just type what you want and it generates a web page for you. Like stuff like that is pretty wild. Like so I can't say specific tools because I unless I bookmark them, I forget them. But I'd say anything that basically helps you turn words into non-verbal things, I find very interesting and a bit strange, but mostly interesting. So that would be the space I would look to explore next. But I don't have specific tools, sorry.
Okay, so we have a question from Simon. What do you think of Canva? What's it best at? And what's their very best use case?
Oh, Canva, yes, that's a good point. I have not used Canva's AI things extensively. I have used it for background generation, for, you know, basically hyper specific things. Again, when I wanted like put it on a graphic and stuff. My best use case, and this is not a joke, was for a LinkedIn post where I wanted to get people to feel intrigued about something that otherwise might just feel like a strange, like linked influencer kind of carousel. And so I did an image of a very fluffy cat, maybe wearing a suit or something like that. And the whole argument was, if you do all these things, you make this cat very happy. Now it's very stupid, but it's memorable. But basically, hyper-specific images to make a point, I think it's good for that. I have not tried other things, like apparently you can turn, you know, you type things and it just starts generating more elaborate documents for you. I've not done loads of that. So I would say I'm a light Canva user, but I use it almost on the daily because I post things on LinkedIn and use graphics for it.
Okay. Question from Annette. Anything for video editing? Just normal stuff, nothing special?
Yes. I like a tool very much called Riverside, because it records your conversations, and then because it's recorded in there, it encodes them and transcribes them, and it lets you basically use AI to do things like remove pauses, remove filler words, although it's kind of okay at that. Sometimes it cuts sentences altogether. And supposedly, I've not tried this yet because I like to check the source material first. But supposedly for long recordings, it also does like social friendly clips, like, you know, you see those podcast clips and stuff. So it theoretically does that, but I need to do some more testing to see if it's good. But it is good for the general use case.
Simon, you just mentioned Lumen. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? We'll give Rob a 30-second break.
Yeah, the thing about Lumen is that it just generates stuff really, really quickly, and it actually matches the words with the images. So we were doing something for a security company that specifically secures CAD files, and it actually found visuals that were somebody on a CAD, tool developing as the words were popping up, saying, "Hey, we work with secure CAD systems," and it just did all that all on its own and matched the sound and the video, and it was just really good. A lot of the ones I've used, they pop up just random pictures of things, and then you end up going back editing, and editing is a real pain in the bum. So it just seemed to do it all within 5 minutes. We had something which was good enough. It's pretty good.
And John, can you tell us a bit about Scenario, because that sounds quite fun? Might go down a rabbit hole here though if I start playing with it.
So it's really good at taking sort of source images and building out in effect a 3D model of certain things. So my silly hat, for example, I generated a couple of images in Midjourney in the past, used those to train Scenario to create a fuller 3D model of the hat, which I can then tell it to create different settings, to have different kind of poses and things like that. I haven't gone completely to town yet with it, but it's a lot of fun, and it could be a dangerous rabbit hole.
Gosh, could this be a new Pixar film, do you think, John?
Adventures of Hat.
So Rob, for people like me
Yes,
that
Mel.
are really not savvy in this space, where would you start? Like, is there one tool you would start with? Is there one particular challenge that you would give us to go and see if we can actually use these tools and start practicing?
I would start with Perplexity. I genuinely think Perplexity is a great piece of tech, great user interface. And like I said, it draws from different models. So you can do tons of stuff with it, right? So for example, if you're starting a new job and you've never worked in B2B SaaS, you can very quickly just start getting it to give you credible information because it sources it. So I'd say it's probably the most complete tool out there. Others might disagree because I know ChatGPT also does a bunch of other things, but in terms of quality of results, Perplexity, big time.
Okay, I'm going to pick on people. John, what would you go for if you could only have one?
Perplexity.
Okay. Simon, what would you go for?
I'd be really boring and say ChatGPT just because of all the different chats, the different models and all the extensions that you can pull in.
So Chris has just asked a question here. Do you have use cases for custom GPTs or off-the-shelf Explore GPTs?
So that Deck of Brilliance is one where essentially I like the idea that, for better and for worse, custom GPTs might become like your own McKinsey in your pocket, where essentially you go, right, this person has all the pricing models loaded up in their brains. So every time I have a pricing question, I can go to that consultant. This person is very good at advertising. So, I'm going to load at all the advertising models, etc. So I like to think of it like that. It's very biased towards strategy, which is my craft. But basically creating model specialists that I can tap into is definitely something that I'm interested in. Or even things like, you could load it with models for financial analysis, and then just go tell me how I should think about the quarterly results for this company. So again, it's like McKinsey in your pocket. Could be an interesting way of putting it. Beyond that, I've not done loads with custom GPTs.
Chris, do you want to, I don't know if you can talk, but do you want to come off mute because you've got lots of questions here and it'd be interesting to get some of your thoughts as well.
Well, yeah, just Bill, thank you for that, Rob. What I do with GPT is upload a PDF primer. So I've saved all my different primers. I'm interested in, the custom GPTs. Are they better at, remembering that primer and rather than having to continually remind it to get back on message?
I don't think they're better. It's just one less step you need to do because you've loaded it once, and then it just becomes that knowledge base, and you can keep adding to it. So that's probably the main reason I would build a custom one. Is like if I keep using the same PDF primer to get it to think about stuff, just create a custom GPT and then it's always there. So I don't think it's better. It's just more efficient for you in the long run.
Cool. I'll take a look. Thank you.
And question from Kobe, what's the best tool for analyzing performance data, for example, with an Excel file?
I'm pretty sure ChatGPT does a good
Yeah.
job, but I usually go for Claude. But again, might be for superficial reasons. They're both good.
Okay, great. Any more questions?
I had one question. Is there anything that does something like Notebook LM? It's such a simple concept. You know, you should upload all your documents and then just click the ones you want it to refer to at any one time. So you don't have to create separate models for each of the different PDFs. You know, that's been super good. The only downside is the model just seems rubbish. It just hallucinates. You know, I said, here are the 10 documents, summarize for me. Give me the quotes, sorry, the most impactful quotes you can find from these customer interviews. And the first two had the word juggling in it. But I was interviewing derivatives traders and nobody said that. And I kept asking it, are you sure? Like, show me the quote. And it did. And I said, they didn't say that. And I went into the PDFs and they're not there.
Wow.
It just becomes useless. And actually started to argue with me. He started to say, I said, familiar with, I said, are you familiar with the term literal? As in, this is a literal quote I'm looking for. And it replied, are you familiar with the term metaphor? Because juggling is used as a metaphor in what I gave you.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Simon, I'd watch my back,
Answering
man.
back,
When they come, they're going to come for you first.
I know, that's exactly, I've been told that. It's like, stop, I thought I'm sitting here at 10 o'clock at night arguing with the bloody model.
So funny.
Claude have a thing that is similar, which is called artifacts, I think. Similar thing where it's like just loaded a bunch of shit and then just you can keep using it to, you know, you can keep referring to documents that are in. I don't know if you can toggle on or off though, because that would be very handy.
I'll go and look at it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, just a quick reminder, you can get way more insights from Rob at salmontheory.email. And I've shared the code in chat. We will follow up to everyone that joined today with the recording, because I know you're going to want to go back over some of this and any useful tips that we've got in the chat as well. So massive thank you to Rob. That was fabulous. I have a lot of discovery work to do, I think. And I think we might need a follow-up in a couple of months' time.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be half different, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. We can do a comparison of like what was in then, what's in now. Are you still loyal to Perplexity, or have you gone over to another one?
Well, we'll see it when they start introducing ads. Those bloody advertisers, man.
So watch this space
thanks,
for one
everyone.
in January. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.